Hello, welcome to Moral Side of the News, our weekly discussion of today's top stories from a moral, ethical, and religious point of view. I'm Shawn Kaelin with the WHAS Crusade for Children, and I'm joined today, as always, by a distinguished panel of local religious leaders. Reverend Michelle Pennix, Lighthouse Christian Church. Father Tony Smith, Archdiocese of Louisville. Reverend Dr. George Wasson, Faithpoint Church. Rabbi Emerita Gaylia R. Rooks, the Temple. And Richard Uhler, retired U.S. Army chaplain. We begin this week with the picture posted by President Trump that appears to depict him as Jesus. This while also in a very public back and forth with Pope Leo about the war in Iran.
This morning, many of the president's supporters furious, calling this picture that Trump posted appearing to depict himself as Jesus blasphemy. Trump took the picture down but is defending the post, claiming he thought it showed him as a doctor.
Mr. President, did you post that picture of yourself depicted as Jesus Christ?
Well, it wasn't depicted. It was me. I did post it, and I thought it was me as a doctor.
It comes as the president is bashing the Pope.
He was very much against what I'm doing with regard to Iran, and you cannot have a nuclear Iran. Pope Leo would not be happy with the end result.
The first American pope has been outspoken against the war in Iran, calling Trump's threat to wipe out a whole civilization truly unacceptable.
Attacks on civilian infrastructure is against international law, but that it is also a sign of the hatred, the division, the destruction that the human being is capable of.
Trump firing back, calling the Pope weak on crime and terrible for foreign policy, adding, "I don't want a Pope who criticizes the President of the United States because I'm doing exactly what I was elected in a landslide to do." But the Pope says he's not afraid of Trump.
I have no fear of neither the Trump administration nor speaking out loudly about the message of the gospel, and that's what I believe.
He's standing by his comments.
I am called to do what the church is called to do. If we're not politicians, we're not looking to make foreign policy, as he calls it, with the same perspective that he might understand it. But I do believe that the message of the gospel, blessed are the peacemakers, is a message that the world needs to hear too.
Trump now facing widespread backlash. American Catholic leaders condemning his comments. Bishop Robert Barron, who sits on the president's own Religious Liberty Commission, calling them entirely inappropriate and disrespectful. And he says Trump should apologize. Overnight, President Trump escalating his attacks against Pope Leo, suggesting the leader of the Catholic Church is unaware of Iran's actions against its citizens. Trump posting just before midnight, "Will someone please tell Pope Leo that Iran has killed at least 42,000 innocent, completely unarmed protesters in the last 2 months, and that for Iran to have a nuclear bomb is absolutely unacceptable." Vice President J.D. Vance, the nation's highest-ranking Catholic politician, now telling the Pope he should be more careful when talking about theology.
In the same way that it's important for the Vice President of the United States to be careful when I talk about matters of public policy, I think it's very, very important for the Pope to be careful when he talks about matters of theology.
Speaking to young conservatives in Georgia Tuesday, Vance taking issue with the Pope for posting that anyone who is a disciple of Christ, the Prince of Peace, is never on the side of those who once wielded the sword and today drop bombs.
Was God on the side of the Americans who liberated France from the Nazis? Was God on the side of the Americans who liberated Holocaust camps and liberated those innocent people from, those who had survived the Holocaust? I certainly think the answer is yes.
Vance adding,
if you're going to opine on matters of theology, you've got to be careful. You've got to make sure it's anchored in the truth. And that's one of the things that I try to do. And it's certainly something I would expect from the clergy.
So panel, I'll just toss it out to you for your discussion on this.
Everyone's looking at me.
Yeah.
Let me, well, first off, I would say I agree with the Holy Father all the way down to the local bishop here and my brother priest. But let me say this. First off, to the Vice President, here sits someone who has a PhD in moral theology, doctorate. Okay, and I can tell you that Vice President Vance's comments are ridiculous. Let me do it this way. Whenever you have one person with another person, two people in a relationship, you have politics in relationship to how they respond one to the other, okay? And having that relationship, there are certain principles that govern that. We call that morality, and what is right and what is wrong. And so in regards to persons, that escalates into not just individual people, but also groups and states. So, for instance, civil law, most corporations are considered legal persons. In regards to states, one to the other, we look upon the United States as a moral person. We look upon Rome, Vatican City, if you want to use that terminology, as a moral person. So what are the relationships between those two? That's also politics. You cannot have relationships without politics. You cannot have politics without moral thought, moral theory, moral theology. And so what is this in regards to the Holy Father and the President in regards to Iran? Of course the Holy Father's against what's happening in Iran. Okay, and to Vice President Cheney, beg pardon, shows my age.
Vance.
Vice President Vance, comment about World War II, some World War II, he wasn't probably even born at the time. It's not that God was in favor of killing those people. It's not that God was committing in some sort of allowing some evil to occur, that good come about. In fact, Paul would say in Romans 8:3-8, I think, or 8:3, one of the two, you cannot do something that's wrong or immoral no matter how much good comes about. And that's the key to this whole event in regards to what's happening in Iran. That's why we got into the just war theory. Just war theory, basically, summing it down, is do the end means equal the ends. In other words, can you do something that's not right in order that good come about? And from the Judeo-Christian perspective, I would presume, we would say, no, you can't. And so you look at every episode of what the president's saying in regards to Iran, every action taken, you look at the just war theory and all the different categories to make a war just has been violated. And this is what the Holy Father's talking about. He did not mention President Trump by name, talking about administrations, which people would say, he's talking about Trump administration and the president. You notice also, if you would, when President Trump responded, it was in the demeaning characterization charges, which are ridiculous, saying that the Holy Father's this, the Holy Father's that. And you notice the response of the Holy Father is still not to go that same direction, but basically say, I'm supporting what we see as the Christian Gospels, Judeo-Christian word theology. And this is what we're saying, that the whole thing is immoral. So, I mean, that would be my opening comments for you. We can go into that if you want to further.
I think you've said a lot there. Thank you for the explanation. No, I think, it is, the entire situation is dumbfounding to me. It is immoral. It is reprehensible that our president and vice president would talk about a religious leader, leader of millions across the world in that light. And the particular comment, it just, especially around, I have to focus in on, we can never allow Iran to have a nuclear bomb when America's the only one that's ever used a nuclear bomb.
Absolutely, yes.
And it's as though we just forget that. It has no place in our understanding of global politics and how we arrived at this point. I am very concerned that we are long past a slippery slope with this administration. We are in, as the Bible says, a dominion of darkness, in my opinion, that he has delivered us from, thankfully. But right now, in the midst of this, I think we just see more and more evidence of that slope. I see more and more evidence of, just absolute disregard for those religious practices and those of religion that have basically helped to develop the fabric of who we say we are.
Yes. I may add something to that, too. The Holy Father is the founder of the group that he was St. Augustine. And Augustine of Hippo and Thomas Aquinas, two great Christian theologians, the governments that we have in this world, including the governments we have in the United States, depends upon a lot of the teachings of Augustine and Thomas Aquinas. So the whole thing of divinity coming, it's not just Roman Catholic or that's just Christian, but it's the whole acknowledging that there's a divine source of wisdom and divine source of guidance comes to play even now.
And speaking as a non-Christian, non-Catholic, non-Christian, but the Hebrew Bible talks again and again about seek peace and pursue it, and there's no peace without justice, and I could go on and on. But I think the Bible, that was a time when warfare was very common, and there are really clear laws about what makes a just war. You're not allowed, according to Judaism, you're not allowed to completely surround the enemy. You have to leave an escape route for, if they change their minds and want to turn and run, or to protect the women and children in those days, or things like that. You're not allowed to chop down trees, especially fruit trees, because are the trees human beings that they make war against? They provide food and sustenance. And so, there are clear limits, I think, to prevent the abuse of power and the abuse of anger in a way that to go back to the Jesus part, that, love your neighbor as yourself, and
bless your enemies. Pray for your enemies.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if we have that one. No, maybe, I don't know. But you're supposed to, but you are supposed to have every opportunity for dialogue.
Right.
I should have prepped some biblical quotes looking forward to this conversation. But there's no question, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, stems from Hillel, who came before Jesus, who said, do not do unto others as you would not want them to do unto you. So it's the same, just flip it to the positive, which actually I kind of like. But, it's the same idea. And as far as the question of religion, the world of religion and the world of politics, each having their own separate realm, I don't understand how you can do that. As Father Tony pointed out, it's completely, every relationship, every interaction has its politics, and everything we do, hopefully, we do as moral beings. Even people who don't believe in God believe that there's a morality and ethical code by which we interact with other human beings, and I just don't think you can separate. I'm very strong on the wall separating religion and politics in terms of, what religion and whose religion and freedom of religion and freedom from religion. But I don't think that it's really even possible to enter into politics without knowing clearly what you believe, and not just you personally, but what does God require of us? I remember seeing a bumper sticker that said, I don't think when Jesus said love your neighbor, I don't think he meant murder them. I thought, wow, that speaks volumes on one little bumper sticker.
Well, one of the things you said, to go back to, you talked about, even those who don't follow Jesus or prescribed religion, believe that there's a moral code. And unfortunately, it was Trump, through his own words only weeks ago, as he discussed Cuba, who said he could do anything he wants, that he is his own moral compass. He is his own, he decides his own morality and what that looks like. So unfortunately, I don't think that everybody does follow the same moral code in our society.
He wants to be the supreme being, and God is the supreme leader, the supreme being. And I don't think that Trump takes kindly to that. But there are so many examples of where, what he thinks, what he wants. Do you really think that he believes that that is appropriate and righteous to say, I'm going to destroy this entire civilization, I'm going to reduce them to rubble, when he talks about Iran? I mean, I find it hard to believe that somewhere deep inside he doesn't know that even just saying those words is so inappropriate, so filled with hate and division.
I'd like to take that in a little different direction. 47 years of hearing death to America, death to Israel. Mm-hmm. That's not appropriate either.
No,
but it's
absolutely.
Done.
Yep.
But I'd also like to, as I was listening to this and doing my little research, is, why don't we hear more preaching from Romans 13, mm-hmm. which says, all right, here's the Christian's relationship to the state. And that does say something in there. Paul says, let every person be subject to governing authorities.
Yes.
That's
Mm-hmm.
not happening over the last 30 years.
Depends on interpretation of governing authorities.
Well, no authority except from God, and those exist have been instituted by God.
Exactly.
Regardless of what, good or bad.
Yeah, that's true.
So, but there's protest, there's conflict, there's, does that mean people want nukes in their backyards? Of course not.
No.
We don't. But, the Army doctrine says the best defense is a good offense. Mm-hmm. And if we wanted to avoid the nukes in the backyard, something had to be done.
Well, just war theory, though, would put a question mark on that as far as what offense you mean. Mm-hmm. If you're saying imminent danger, the present administration, the Secretary of War, so-called, has said imminent, they've reinterpreted what imminent means. Mm-hmm. It's not you coming at me this time and showing you imminent danger. It's down the road.
It's the potential.
I wasn't in imminent danger back in 1969 either. But once I got to the combat zone, I was in imminent danger.
When you got to the combat zone, you were, yes.
But I wasn't prior to that. No. So what did it mean to me?
It meant you were put in a position by some individuals where they're questioned about legal authority. You were put in a position you had to defend yourself.
Yeah.
That's a different issue.
And it was, and Johnson used the Gulf of Tonkin incident to get the dollars he wanted and the people he wanted.
Right.
And that was really not appropriate, because then we lost 42,000 people after that.
Yes. And how many Vietnamese?
Quite a few.
They don't talk about that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm saying that fallaciously, that.
I know.
I think one of the challenges that we see is that, we're all the victims of clickbaits. We're all the victims of whatever information is actually shared with us on the videos and on TV and on the news and all those kinds of things. And there was an expression that I was thinking about when Shawn had sent us the topics that we might be talking about. And it's this idea of armchair quarterbacking. And we all get to sit around and think about what would we do and what is what the president or his cabinet doing? Is it the right thing or the wrong thing? And they know stuff that we don't know. There's stuff that, what's the line from A Few Good Men? You can't handle the truth. Right. I just think that there's got to be more into the story than what's grabbing our attention. Because as Richard, one of the things that we do know is the death to Christians and the death to Jews and the wipe Israel off the map. Like we see these things, right? We know these things, and what's the right and appropriate and just response? I'm going to tell you, I'm really grateful it's not me having to make that decision. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that my wife and I do every day, we have a soldier who is serving overseas, and every day we pray for her and we pray for her soldiers that are doing what she's doing and other things. We pray for our president, for our administration. We pray for ourselves, right? Like we see things now played out on the media for us. I would like to take both the president and the Pope and say, okay, you guys go to a room, right? Like when I have folks in my church who are or who are talking to me about issues or problems that they're dealing with other people, I usually say, so how are you dealing with that? Well, we've been texting back and forth. I'm like, that's the problem. Mm-hmm. Stop the texting. Get in the room and talk. Get in this place where you can have conversation, because there's just something about being face to face that just changes the dynamics that what using a device is not going to do. So, I can look and go, I'm like, why is he being his worst enemy and putting some of this stuff out there? And why are we being fed this? Well, we're being fed this stuff because this is what's getting the clicks and this is what's getting the attention. We know that we are dealing with worldviews and with belief systems that are miles apart from one another, right? Like literally miles apart from one another. And we would like to say, can we all just get along? Remember when we were growing up, that Coca-Cola commercial, I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony, buy the world a Coke, right? Can we do that? Like buy the world a Coke. And I don't say that to be simplistic about the deal, but there's so much here that I just have to acknowledge the fact that I'm sure I don't know a lot.
Well, I can accept that, but to a point. Because in order to validate what you're saying, you have to look at the history of the individuals involved. And look at the history, I'll mention President Trump. Talking to him in a room, you've heard what he said, whether it's put there for his negative or positive about him, but look at his history of how he handles his, quote, political enemies. To me, that smacks in what you're saying there, because we have someone who's, in my mindset, and the way I see what's being, not just in the liberal press, or the media press, or the right press, is basically lying to the American people about lots of things. He cannot, in fact, just war theory says one individual cannot start a war. It's immoral if it happens. Now, he is, by Constitution, as I understand it, my civics, do they teach civics anymore in school? No. That he is responsible to answer to Congress.
But he isn't.
He hasn't. He refuses. He's responsible to answer to the Supreme Court. He hasn't. He isn't. He is basically, in my mindset, I'm not a Democrat. In my mindset, he is basically showing that he is unable to do what you're asking him to do.
Well, and I'd say the same. I'm not a Democrat or Republican, fiercely independent, but you know, when we talk about get them in the room, I have a lot of experience with bringing people together in rooms, and it always is conditional on one person, both people agreeing to be accountable. Right. And owning their part in this. We would not be having this discussion if Trump himself did not take to Truth Social to attack the Pope initially. It was his words that brought us to this place. And yes, the media does what they do, which is to grab onto those things that will improve ratings and get attention, but you have to do something to get that in the first place. And that is what Trump is known for, continuing to poke bears, start fights, bully, and as we see in this case, never apologize. I didn't do anything wrong. I did it, I put it out there. There's no opportunity to get him and someone else in a room when you won't even admit that you had a part to play in.
And I think that in some senses, he's being very honest. You know, I mean, like changing the Department of Defense to the Department of War. I mean, that says it all. You know, he is not focusing on defending our country or defending other people in the world. It's the Department of War. In spite of the fact that in, I think it was 2019, he posted on X, or whatever it was, that, you know, going into war in the Middle East is just a disaster and a horrible idea, should never be done. But, you know, when it comes to his agenda, which personally I don't think is the agenda of the American people, and I think more and more Americans are recognizing that, and
I think you're going to see a backpedaling begin.
Before the midterms?
Roman Catholics represent almost 25% of the voting population in this country, 23%. And the latest stat that came out, his support from Roman Catholics has gone from 50-some down to the bottom 40s. So it's underwater now, in a sense. And this is just for the voting individuals.
Well, no, there's no question. A lot of people who voted for Trump both times are saying, you know, I drank the Kool-Aid. I don't know, you know, how other people are telling me, but.
Well, if he has any political acumen, as they say, there'll be some backpedaling on this. But again, the Holy Father could care less. I mean, he's speaking as he sees worldwide for the gospel.
because he represents all the Catholics, millions of Catholics all around the world.
Like 1.5 billion, I think,
Billion.
somewhere around there.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure we have enough time to move on to the next topic. We'll save it for the next time. Richard's here because it hits close to his heart. We're talking military chaplains and the change that the Defense Department has done with that, or Department of War.
Yeah.
But let's stay on this topic. We have 3 minutes left. We didn't really touch on what's kicked off the week when on Truth Social, President Trump put out the image of him, many say him depicted as Jesus ministering, him saying that he was a doctor ministering.
Except that J.D. Vance, the vice president, immediately said, oh, that was just a joke. So they got to get their stories straight.
So your thoughts quickly on that?
Well, you're seeing more and more images of not Trump, but other people. I mentioned Dolly Parton now has one out. She didn't put it out, but someone else put it out. Other individuals, notable individuals, are now being portrayed in that same image. I think someone mentioned that the one image was President Trump as the patient, not the person above. So, all right, to me, it's, excuse my French, an asinine way of doing things.
Yeah, I think that, I think that is where the problem starts with what that image is. And I think that's one of the things that has so corroded our whole image of Christianity and Jesus itself in what is the image of God and who has a right to portray it. You know, God has been very clear about not making things an idol. We don't know what Jesus looked like, but we can rest assured that he was not white. We know that for a fact. And to represent him in that way, I think is sacrilegious and beneath anyone. And I think this is just more of the same thing over and over. We see him poking at those of faith and belief, and I have no idea why, except it's just evil. It's just evil.
Well, he doesn't see it that way because I don't think, honestly, that he is a man of faith. And I mean, I believe that Jesus was a human being, not divine any more than you're the daughter of God and you're the son of God, and so Jesus was the son of God. But Trump wants to see himself as divine, or at least divinely appointed, and a lot of people have said that.
Quickly.
I'm not sure that I would agree with that, but I think we could all agree on is the fact that we do dumb stuff. Right? I mean, I was thinking of a story that I had a young man in my church who posted something about an employer. And I'm like, dude, what are you thinking? You can't post that stuff, but we just, everything goes viral today. Everything. And it's not good for us.
And it stays viral.
And it stays viral.
Quickly, anything on this, Richard? Nope, good, okay. All
We don't want the president to do dumb stuff. That's the problem. We want, not repeatedly. At some point, the dumb stuff has to stop.
I would really take offense if I were a Christian that he did that. I mean,
We'll leave it at there. Sorry to cut you off, Gaylia, but we're going to run out of time. So thanks to our guests today, Reverend Michelle Pennix, Father Tony Smith, Reverend Dr. George Wasson, Rabbi Emerita Gaylia Rooks, and Richard Uhler. Have a great week. We'll see you again next week on Moral Side of the News.